Folks, there is something happening in our neighboring country that demands our immediate attention. Actually, it was information that I received that actually interrupted a recording session. This information, my friends, is explosive, and we need to pay very urgent attention to it, especially because it links directly to the prediction made on this channel that the first rogue regime that will fall will be Tanzania, and then Uganda, and then Kenya, in that order. This information is directly linked to that prediction. Welcome to my show today, where I'm going to touch on a few other political hotspots and developments in our country that are telling us very clearly it is not business as usual. Karibuni sana, twende kazi. The ODM party 20th anniversary celebrations in Mombasa, Pwani, are fire. There is no other way of describing it. Hey. Unpredictably, the issue of ODM being in the broad-based government or not being in the broad-based government is causing very serious divisions within this political party that was founded by Baba, Raila Odinga. But I want you to pay a lot of attention to the rising stars in Mombasa. You know, party meetings, conventions, celebrations like these ones have been known throughout history to be the place where political stars are launched. And in other cases, political stars rise. Yeah, and they continue rising and rising after that. And there are many examples from history. Maybe the one that comes to mind immediately is that of former President Barack Hussein Obama. In fact, he had a very, very small role to play in a Democratic Party convention, and the rest is history. Of course, some of the rising stars you can clearly see are Winnie Odinga. Oh yes. Oh yes. I can hear people complaining here and there. But I think it is becoming clearer by the day who has inherited the mantle from the great Raila Odinga. It is also very clear that Edwin Sifuna is no pushover. And of course, sly, scheming, Babu Wino, mostly using his people, is making quite a mark, and I believe has decided to use this opportunity to become more visible nationally, and especially to ODM members countrywide. And I also believe you noticed that party leader Oburu Odinga is in trouble. Hey, he has stepped into shoes which are just too big for him. Anyway, let's wait and see how that one develops going forward. Now, there's another development which according to me was very serious, shocking news, big headlines, yeah, which very few people followed up. But I believe this was very significant. And actually it's linked to what we're going to discuss today. Activists Bob Njagi and Nicholas Oyo spoke to the media for the first time after their release. And what they had to say, for starters, they confirmed Oh yes. They confirmed my seemingly ridiculous allegations in a recent video of who it is who did the damage in Tanzania. Foreigners. I know a few of you did not receive that one well. You wondered, what is Kumekucha Chris smoking these days? Nini imefanyika kwa huyu jamaa? Well, it was confirmed. And the harrowing tale they had to tell tells us very clearly that the center cannot hold in that country called Uganda. It can't. Because when you start disappearing those who are close to very high-ranking government officials, people who are powerful, people who can do you real damage, then you know a leader has lost it. Human nature tells you immediately, you cannot do that and get away with it. Maybe for a short time, but you will not get away with it in the long term. Anything can happen at any time. Anyway, let's get on with the business of the day. What interrupted my recording? That information. And I know my source is listening in to this show today, but I'm sure they understand because I explained to them how giving even a small hint can endanger the people in the chain that released that information, because it is from very, very deep in the Tanzanian security apparatus. Now, some very senior American military personnel have been able to confirm via satellite images that actually what people are claiming happened in Tanzania actually happened. In other words, they have the evidence. Okay? Now, it is very important to note that when you start involving the international community, the first thing they need, very important, is evidence. And sometimes, when some cheeky, powerful nations want to move against another nation, what they'll do, because usually there is no evidence, what they will do is they will manufacture that evidence. And then based on that evidence, they will make their move. But this is a case where the evidence, irrefutable evidence, has been obtained. And this is mostly concerning the mass kaburis across the country where those who had lost their lives were buried en masse. By the way, there's some other information linked to this. Apparently what was happening is that bodies were being collected from hospitals, morgues, etc., etc. Specifically the ones that had recessive wounds, clearly visible. And in my opinion, this is more evidence that this was a massacre. Okay? Because what happened soon after is that the task became overwhelming. Mili zilikuwa nyingi sana. So they stopped. Now that is very telling. I'm sure you get what I'm driving at. And I believe that is why we're seeing all those very graphic images circulating on social media. You know, in Kenya during the Gen Z protests, we had a lot of victims who are also young ladies. But the situation in Tanzania is different. They are all young men. Some of them look so young, as if they are underage. 16 years, 15 years, 17 years. Oh boy. Oh boy. Anyway, let's get back to the shocking information that I received. Okay? As a result of these satellite images that are evidence, I am informed of the following, and this is open to all kinds of interpretations. Okay, I have my own, but I'm sure you too may have your own. As a result, the upcoming 9th of December, holiday in Tanzania, I believe it is the country's Independence Day, yeah, a trap has been set for that day for the regime. Okay? Because what is going to happen on that day is that there are going to be protests, very serious protests, right across the country, yet again. Okay? I believe that the authorities in Tanzania were very sure that after scaring the masses through what happened, mauaji hapa na pale, that the citizens will get scared and nobody will ever dare come out again for any maandamano. Well, in my opinion, that displays very poor knowledge of human nature. Imagine the following situation. You have lost somebody close. How are you bound to behave? I've been there not too long ago, and I can tell you, somebody who has lost somebody very close is not very normal. Okay? I'm sure you catch my drift. And therefore, the government of Tanzania will have a problem in their hands. Are they going to respond the way they responded earlier? Or are they going to do something different? And if they're going to do something different, what are the options? What can they do other than the right thing, which is for President Samia Suluhu Hassan to resign? A caretaker government should then be put in place to organize fresh elections. That is the only way out of this crisis. Hakuna plan B. That is the only way. Okay? And of course, matters were made worse by the way the government responded to demonstrators. Because if they had not responded in that way, they'd have bought themselves more time. Now, what they've done is that they've reduced the time in which they have to think and act. They have reduced it dramatically. Now, I want us to understand something that I know will shock most of us. This crisis in Tanzania did not actually start after the elections. No! It started long before the elections. Okay? And I believe the best, clearest evidence of this is the military person, I believe a captain in rank, who spoke out even before the elections, yeah, saying that the military were not going to be involved in what was about to happen in the country. Yeah, that was the long and short of what they said. And they were promptly fired. Okay? But it was more than clear that they had the blessing of other more senior military personnel. So, what was the crux of this crisis that started before the elections? Actually, there are two sides. One side is the rich, corrupt, and powerful who want to retain the status quo at all costs. People on that side include the biggest advisors and supporters and henchmen of President Suluhu Hassan. Okay, I've identified them in previous videos. On the other side of this deadly boxing ring are patriots, people who love their country, Tanzania. And this group also includes the military high command. Okay? And it also includes some very powerful people within the intelligence community, usalama wa taifa. Now, the reason why this information is so scary is because, you can imagine, after that stormy Security Council meeting, where both sides were in attendance, and of course the corrupt side won, and it was decided to do this the Kenya way, using mercenaries from outside the country, Uganda to be specific. After that other side won, in that their opinion became the decision the results in the country have been chaotic. It has not gone how they expected it to go. For example, they did not expect any exposure. They didn't. The internet was shut down. Tanzanians were feeling very unsafe. In fact, some of them fled to Kenya. Yes, we have Tanzanian refugees in the country as I speak. And in case you didn't know, they continue to pour into the country. Okay? And so, those in power, the powerful, the corrupt, did not expect to be exposed. You know, it is very sad, because sometimes you can look at what your neighbor is doing and then you try and copy it. Maybe you see your neighbor, a man, is involved in that very disgusting criminal activity of wife beating, and then you, who has no experience in it, you decide to try it, and then you discover your wife sio kidogo. What I'm saying is that it is not a good idea to blindly copy others. Yeah, you may not be as good as they are in containing the situation and in doing what they're doing that you're trying to copy. I'm sure you get it. And what followed the exposure was a lot of attention from the international community. Now, Tanzania in its entire history has never experienced any kind of serious attention from the international community. Never, ever. This is the first time. So tell me, do you think they have any idea on how to handle it? On how to cool things? Of course not. I can hear somebody saying, well, they can call in consultants. Yes, they can. But those consultants don't know Tanzania. They don't. And even if they do, they will need a little time to be brought up to speed about where the country is right now. And you see, the thing the Tanzanian government does not have is time. Okay? Actually, in my opinion, the people at the forefront of the response by the Tanzanian government are old men wamepitwa na wakati, and to make matters worse, they are arrogant. Because, for example, how do you advise the president to come out and address the nation and tell the nation with a straight face that the entire troubles across the entire country were caused by neighboring Kenyans? How do you advise your president to say something as far-fetched as that? And at a time when there's a crisis, people are listening carefully and they're analyzing carefully, more carefully than usual, what you're saying. So what is the impact of that on Tanzanians who know it is a lie? Actually, it is impossible. Tanzania is a very huge country. How did Kenyans infiltrate, including into some areas that are a 2-day journey from Dar es Salaam? 2 days. 1 day is not enough to reach there. How? How did Kenyans do that? Huh? Hey. And I know most of us will remember the address President Samia has given to the people, yeah, saying that she has forgiven some youths. And she warned them never to try the same thing again. Now, who are you talking to? Are you talking to 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds? Seriously? Don't you think that Tanzanians have a brain to think? Or is it because all this time they've been very meek, very quiet, even as you do your things? So much so that you thought they're stupid? Well, you're about to find out that you're very, very wrong. Yeah, in your assumptions, in your arrogant assumptions. Now, by the way, I've dealt with some of these old men in the security sector. Yeah. In fact, I was once in a situation where I was refused entry into Tanzania, and they called one of these big bosses. I believe my timing was very wrong. This was the time when the president in that country was very tense, the late Magufuli. Yeah, he had just tested oil and bananas for corona. You remember the story? Things were very tense, and they were very nervous about infiltration into the country by foreigners. Yeah? So they called this big boss, and I'm sorry to say this, but his reasoning, according to Kenyan standards, was grade 2, and I'm not exaggerating. That was his reasoning capacity. Why is it that these old men in Tanzania do not retire? Why? There are a lot of very young, capable Tanzanians who can take up their jobs and do a much better job. Why don't they just retire, resign, or repeat on our wakati? They can't catch up. There's no way. Oh gosh. Now my shock, and it's very unfortunate, is that some of this thinking is very high up there advising the president. What do you expect the results will be? Well, we're already seeing some of the results. Tragic, to say the least. And of course, as I've said before, all this is linked to neighboring Kenya and Tanzania, this crisis. This mess in Tanzania is not going to leave Kenya and Uganda untouched. Why? Because we already know that foreign troops came into the country from Uganda. They're the ones who have done most of the damage, if not all the damage. Yeah, I'm talking about loss of lives. And then the Kenyan government made a very major blunder. They congratulated President Suluhu Hassan, yeah, on her win. 97% of the vote. And then they not only did that, the country sent, the government of Kenya, sent the deputy president to that swearing-in ceremony. Now, that is very significant, because what it means is that Kenya fully supports what happened, and indeed what is happening. Officially, the government supports that. Now, I believe we've all noticed the Kenyan government has tried to distance itself, pole-pole, from this mess. But it is too late. It's too late. Kenya as a country cannot come out of this unscathed. And then, of course, we have to make room for our brothers and sisters from Tanzania who are flocking into the country as refugees. Please, please, Kenyans, especially those Kenyans who have been to Tanzania and have been treated badly, please treat our brothers and sisters well. Please have some empathy. Yeah, and remember the wise saying of Swahili old men, ukiona mwenzako akinyolewa, weka maji kwa kichwa. Okay? And of course, the other very obvious reason why Kenya and Uganda will not remain unscathed by this mess in Tanzania is that where we are headed, it seems that there'll be some kind of investigation. And when you start a thorough investigation, it touches on everybody involved. Now, the reason why you should pay attention to that is that you remember activists Bob Njagi and Nicholas Oyo, who were released from 38 days of shida nyingi, being tortured and all. Remember what they had to say. They were very clear that there has been cooperation between the governments of the 3 East African countries, yeah, when it comes to handling their citizens who are protesting peacefully for their rights. I'm sure you get what I mean. And there's plenty of evidence of this in the public domain, even before Bob Njagi and Nicholas Oyo told us what they told us. For instance, activist, you remember Boniface Mwangi, remember what he told us? It was clear to him those people in Tanzania who did what they did to him had the full blessings of the Kenyan government. And that is not all. You remember the comment by Oscar Sudi, who is close to the regime. Remember what he said? He appeared to be giving direct instructions, to those people who had Boniface Mwangi. And at that time, the whereabouts of Boniface Mwangi were not known. But it appears Oscar Sudi knew. Actually, it was clear he knew where they were. And he knew what they were going through. And that is why he was giving advice, on how whatever was being done to them could be escalated. That is very obvious. I have some very troubling feeling that this evidence that was obtained by senior military personnel in the United States of America will leak into social media. It will be exposed for the whole world to see, which should not surprise anybody. After all, we're in the season of exposure, aren't we? Oh boy, what happened in Tanzania is beyond sad. Anyway, back briefly into local politics. There are many people who have come out and told me, and some of them have said it in the comments, that actually Raila Odinga was so valuable to the Ruto government that it is not possible, that alimalizwa. Okay? Now, what if I told you that the whole plan started when some people were very determined to get Raila Odinga out of the way because they knew, or they thought, Raila was the only obstacle standing between them and a huge fortune in looted public funds. So much so that they convinced him, I don't know how, to vie for a senior position at the African Union. Okay, I'm sure you remember that. This thing was activated even before that African Union thing. But these people forgot that politics is very fluid. Things change very quickly and very fast. So that by the time Raila was passing on, he was a very useful member of the Ruto broad-based government. Okay? Anyway, I strongly advise that you take in my very latest special report and you'll be able to understand better because it is so detailed. It gives details, it gives dates, it gives everything. Okay? You can see details on your screens right now. For the very special price of only Kenya shillings 2,999. Yes, it has been reduced. So take full advantage of this. This is a brand new offer. For only Kenya shillings 2,999, you can have this explosive special report in your inbox. Okay, use the usual telephone number and M-Pesa to that number, and pop, it should be in your inbox very, very quickly. And of course, it'll help a great deal if you text me your email address immediately after payment, or send me an email with evidence of payment. Okay, and fortunately, we also still have the offer. Alternatively, you can take full advantage of the offer for the golden key for 1 full year, okay, for only the price of Kenya shillings 5,999. It is a real bargain because there's usually a lot of sensitive information we produce within just a year. Okay, every month something comes out. Every month 2, 3, 4 plus weekly intelligence briefings, etc., etc. It's a lot of highly sensitive information, and it is an amazing offer because of that. Okay, however, if you're a long time follower of the Kumekucha brand, and you can prove it, maybe you're already a member of WAB, you also still have that very unique opportunity of getting the life golden key. Okay, you can see details on your screens right now. For only Kenya shillings 6,555, you can get that, and that means you will never, ever, ever again have to worry about paying for any sensitive information. Please take action quickly. This offer comes down and vanishes into the horizon at any time. So act quickly if you're in a position to. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.